Good morning. I hope by this time you've written down your first POD. I have your folders. I'll be getting them back to you tomorrow. Also, tomorrow we'll be going over your test grades. Some of you got to see them today. Some of you got to see them yesterday. We'll go over a short answer. However, in class, I am in the building today, but I will not be in class. I had a scholar bill match. Your first POD from Chapter 22. I see that some of you have already written it down. It's on the board when you come in. I don't think it's anything new, so please, let's make sure that we write these things down. And this is going to affect your grade quite a bit. 65 points was how much your folder was worth yesterday, and some of your test grades could really use that. So the last state added to the United States, by this time you have written down the answer is Hawaii. Now, right now I need you to open your book to page 636. Right now, I don't need to hear anything else other than you opening your book. I should hear some pages kind of twirling. Don't be groaning. I'm not here, but we kind of understand. So turn to pages 636. 636. Okay, chapter 22, overseas expansion. Now, if you didn't bring your book today, Mr. Wilkerson will be writing down your name just to kind of add to how many no materials you have this far. Now, as you can see, as you're looking in your book, I've blown this up for those of you who did not bring your book today. Overseas expansion actually takes us back in time just a little bit uh, to 1865, which was we've studied, and we go forward and backwards in time. Your book is not great about keeping it in chronological order, but this back and forth kind of gives us an idea of where we've been and also where we're going. The first thing in American history that you need to know about is the purchase of Alaska. We bought Alaska from Russia in 1867. A lot of people criticize this purchase. They called the guy who made it, they called it Seward's Icebox. He was our Secretary of State at the time. However, as we go through today, we'll see Alaska wasn't that bad of an idea. At first, we purchased Alaska. We thought it was very cold. We thought the weather was just going to be snow after snow after snow. Wasn't always the case. We eventually found gold. If you've watched Gold Rush Alaska, they're still finding gold today. And Alaska is actually one of our larger sources of oil in the United States. Its sheer size, a very great purchase. We bought it for about $7 million, 2 cents per acre. Again, they called it the polar bear garden at first, but we warmed up to Alaska over time. The next major event on the timeline focuses on the Suez Canal. Um, Eventually, we'll be talking about geography in here. They'll ask you to know where the Suez Canal is. We have to go to the other side of the world to find it, so let's quickly go. The Suez Canal connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea. The Mediterranean is up here, Red Sea is down here. Now, this was going to save a long trip off of a boat ride from Europe to Asia. You can see the trip from London here. So as we start in London, we go, through the Straits of Gibraltar here, through the Mediterranean Sea, now through this canal, into the Red Sea, and to Mumbai. Now, this trip is going to save countless numbers of miles. You can see if we pull up our calculators or smart devices. If I had to pose this question to you and we subtracted the list here, 12,300 miles minus the 7,200 miles, we get whoa, sorry, let's try it again. 12,300 miles minus 7,200 miles, we get a great saving. Okay, much better math. We save approximately 7,200 miles on this trip. Now, this was going to be very important. This is, about half the trip, and they can make this trip safer and much more efficient. This is going to be the kind of the motive of this chapter. We see that the United States is expanding while other places are trying to get around the world a lot quicker. Remember, we're back in the 1900s and early 1900s. They haven't perfected air travel yet, and the Wright brothers are still a few years away. As we look back at your timeline, the next major advancement happens at Pearl Harbor. In 1887, we establish a naval base at Pearl Harbor. You can see later on these big, huge ships at Pearl Harbor. Now, Pearl Harbor was going to act as a perfect naval base for us, completely surrounded. You don't have to worry about your ships, getting bowled over by hurricanes, high water, or anything else because they're protected inside of this harbor right here. We always thought that this would be a great spot, not just for a military presence in the Pacific, but a spot to keep us safe and also a spot to stop and refuel and repair broken down warships, which was a kind of a big deal for us back in the day because we had to get supplies on these ships, on way to Asia. So it took a little bit of a journey to get from point A to point B, and Hawaii was going to serve as a great spot for the United States to pick up. Next in world history, we go to the other side of the world, uh, a country of Vietnam. Now, we'll learn much more about Vietnam, hopefully not as much and a little bit more than what Forrest Gump knows about Vietnam. However, on the other side of the world in 1883, we never thought a country of its magnitude would ever create a war in it that would involve the United States. However, as you can see, little old Vietnam right here. We thought it to be very essential for our national security to go take over part of this country. Now, we got involved when it was North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and we'll talk in future chapters about communists, but this is kind of the chapter that gets the United States being the big brother to countries that can't take care of themselves. So we see that they threw this into our timeline. Vietnam is currently going to be owned by the French, and as we'll see time and time again in history, we always have to bail out the good old French. The last thing, in 1889, the Pan American Union is established. Quickly, this picture is just to unite the Americas, and we were going to try to keep America for the Americas. We wanted our hemisphere, here is North America, here is South America. We wanted to keep us to ourselves and keep Europe way over here on the other side of the world. We didn't like all these Europeans in here, like in Cuba and Central and South America. We like to keep America for the Americas, and that is another one of our goals, the security of this in this chapter. On the next page, we see in 1895, Jose Marti leads a revolt in Cuba. Now, Cuba is 90 miles south of what state? Good. You said Florida. That's correct. Here's Florida right here, 90 miles south. Now, there are people that try to swim this. It can be done. I probably couldn't do it. I kind of sink like a rock. However, 90 miles away, this is pretty important to our national security. So in 1895, as Jose Marti leads this revolution, he is going to be revolting against the Spanish, who currently own Cuba. Hence why many people in Central and South America speak the language. Cuba is not an exception. So as we move through, we see that Cuba, 90 miles away, is going to threaten our national security. So we feel that it's important that we get involved. In 1898, the Spanish-American War breaks out over events that happen in Cuba. Now, here we see the star of Night at the Museum, Teddy Roosevelt. That's not Robin Williams there. They called it a splendid little war. However, it was not so splendid. Although we didn't lose very many troops to casualties in hand-to-hand battle, we'd lose a lot of troops to the pure geography of Cuba, which is very tropical, and mosquitoes were actually going to kill a lot more people than the Spanish were when we were fighting in this war. We were helping the Spanish, or helping the Cubans fight for their independence. Something, again, we wanted to keep America for the Americas, and this was our goal. The next event on the timeline, 1900, Hawaii becomes a U.S. territory. Now, not quite a state. However, they're going to be a territory so we can trade with them a little bit more effectively. In 1901, as we see, Hawaii is a great stopping point here between the United States and Asia, and we would have to stop and refuel very often. Sorry, next major event, Cuba in 1901 finally gets its independence from, I'm sorry, who were they fighting in the Spanish-American War? Also the language that they speak. Good Spanish. Next on the timeline, in 1904, the Roosevelt Corollary is issued. We'll speak much more about this later on in the chapter. However, right now, all you kind of need to know is that this was a way that we, as the United States, could be the big brother and get involved in any country in South America if they are having a problem, whether it be economically or if they're having kind of like a war over independence with these European countries. The United States would be able to get involved. We were going to start this this big brother thing where we get involved in little countries that sometimes don't really want us there. And you can probably think of some, Afghanistan, Iraq. Now, the work that we're doing right now in those countries is pretty good and crucial. However, a lot of people think that we need to keep our nose in our own business. This is the country we start sticking our nose in other people's business. We all know how that feels in junior high. The last event on the timeline. In 1914, the Panama Canal opens. Now, the Panama Canal again was going to save lots of time. 13,000-mile trip was the old route from New York City. Sorry, almost ran out of gas. And finally to San Francisco, 13,000 miles later. Now, this canal, which is going to be cut through the very, very small area of Panama, was going to use some natural features, a couple of lakes in Panama, to cut down this 13-mile trip and make it almost a third of the length. Now, the next thing I need you to do is we've gone through the timeline today and we've just kind of given you an introduction to the chapter. You have an assignment in class that I need you to do for tomorrow. It's over section 1. You're going to be reading about expanding horizons. So we will review and go over your homework assignment tomorrow. Uh, Mr. Wilkinson will come by and pass these things out. Now, however, I have an opportunity for extra credit for you. Many of you need it. Your extra credit is to get 2 signatures on the back of your homework assignment. These signatures are just for people who voted. They just have to sign their name. I voted. They have to be at least 18. They could be your parents, grandparents, godparents, whatever you have. If they're over 18 and they voted, you may use them for extra credit. Now, we can't double up, so this may affect some twins in the 8th grade. However, I bet that there is a neighbor or close family friend that you can find that also voted in yesterday's election. So we'll talk more about the election. We'll talk more about Section 1 tomorrow. But right now, I need you to get started on your homework assignment. You have about 25 minutes left in class. So take your time, do your best, and I will see you first thing tomorrow.